Welcome to Review from the Opposition. We're speaking to Jason from the Rams Review podcast.
How are we doing?
Had better Saturdays, but anyway, we'll get to that in a second. You predicted a 3-1 Millwall victory, and I bet you've never been happier to be incorrect.
Yeah, absolutely.
A game which was settled by the odd goal in one, going to Derby County. Jason, give us your overview of how you thought the game went. Was that result justified?
Yeah, I think obviously we spoke a couple of days ago, and I said that one of the big things from Millwall, looking at Millwall as opposition, was that the fight and the desire that they bring. And I didn't think Derby were up to the task. We played Middlesbrough a couple of weeks ago at the Riverside, who was a big physical side. And
I remember you mentioning.
Yeah, we looked boys to men. We really did. So no, there was never a great deal of positivity from me on the last conversation and what I thought about this game. But I actually thought, surprisingly, unfortunately for Millwall, Derby put in one of the best dogged performances I've seen in probably nearly a calendar year, and that's no lie. It's Derby did something that I didn't actually think was in them, to be perfectly honest with you. We fought, we scrapped, we battled. As you know, we've just been saying off air. The tackles were flying in.
They were.
The desire was there. Obviously, I was very impressed with Millwall's press from the
a lot of energy
for the first
there.
20 minutes.
First 20 minutes, yes.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, Millwall scoring that first 20 minutes, the game's a completely different, scenario more than likely. But Derby kind of rode that and grew into the game in the first half. I thought it was scrappy at times, don't get me wrong, but the second half again, not the best advert for football.
No.
It was scrappy. It wasn't fluid. But the longer the game, from my perspective as a Derby fan, the longer the game went on, it was always going to be a if somebody scores. And on this occasion, it was one half decent move that it ultimately settled the tie.
How do you think substitutions affected the final passage of the game? Because obviously there was substitutions almost directly after the Derby goal from Millwall's perspective. I guess my feeling is they didn't really have much of an impact on the game from Millwall's perspective, but Derby's really shored up that midfield, and I think you brought on a defender very late on, actually, for Kazim Richards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest with you, I could stretch that back to what I'm about to say for quite some time. One of the things under the ex-manager, from the Derby fans' perspective, was substitute selections at the right the right player at the right time. It was always off, and to be honest with you, I mean, it's still something that kind of exists at the minute. And I actually thought Derby, for some reason, managed to get their substitutions absolutely spot on today. It just worked. I mean, it was a much stronger bench for Derby today.
Okay.
Because technically there was probably 2 or 3 players on the bench that have been first-team regulars over the last 6 or 7 games, and obviously it's just not worked for Derby, so a change was needed. So actually the bench looks a little bit stronger in that respect, and I thought, like you said, Millwall, for me, Millwall's changes didn't really have an effect as much as I'm sure Gary Rowett would have wanted it to. Matt Smith obviously coming off, he's always a big target man, had a good battle up there with Curtis Davies and Matt Clark.
Yeah, he did.
Derby's 2 centre-offs. I mean, I know he scored against us last time we was at the Den earlier on, just after lockdown, and, he is a common threat. And I thought Jed Wallace, after the first 10 minutes, was quite quiet. He did that mazy run where, in all fairness, he should have scored. Marshall's pulled out a wonderful save there, but he should have scored. And then after that, we kind of kept him quiet, which is something that I know I've said to you before that Derby have struggled to do in the past. And then, just as the game ebbed on, I mean, for me personally, looking at it, I'm surprised Millwall didn't come with a bit more threat. If you look at the old 90 minutes as a whole, I don't think Millwall threatened Derby all too much.
Three shots on target.
I was expecting a lot more.
Kind of been the story of our season, actually.
Yeah. Derby just kind of... They just grew in confidence. I mean, any Millwall fan who saw that should look at Derby and go, they're not a bottom of the table side.
I was going to say that, yeah.
But that's the first performance like that we've had probably all season. So, it's not all they don't deserve to be down there, because we do, because we've not performed like that. But for some reason today, which is very unlike Derby, certainly over the last few months, they had a battle, they had a desire, and they won that against a usually solid Millwall side.
I think you've very nicely covered the best move of the game that Millwall had. I think that Jed Wallace run was the highlight, in my opinion. What was the best move for Derby, do you think? I think there are a couple of things in my mind, but it'd be interesting to see what you think.
I mean, obviously the goal was yes, nice from a Derby's perspective, but I think it came... I think it came after that, actually. We made a nice break down the left, and we were almost queuing up to score. Yeah. And I can't remember if it was just before, actually, or just after the goal. But we are a little bit scared of pulling the trigger. It's something that certainly the fans and the management have kind of questioned on certain players, that we just don't pull the trigger. We try and work it that too much in that final third, and we were queuing up, and in the end it ended up being a bit of a goalmouth scrap. But we had 3 opportunities there where we should have pulled the trigger. And let's face it, other than the goal, Derby didn't really trouble Bulakowski at all. No. With any sort of venom. So that kind of says to me still, whilst it's a win for Derby, it's work in progress.
It reminded me very much of a Millwall victory at Pride Park that I think happened in 2014, when we still had the Jolly Baldman in charge. And I think Steve Morrison scored in about very similar header from across, not in a similar sort, but and we got a snatch and grab win at Pride Park. I think the season we got relegated, actually.
Right.
It reminded me a lot of that performance, but obviously the boot was on the other foot. How did you feel about the referee today? 5 bookings for Derby.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's a bit strange because you don't normally associate Derby with getting stuck in too much. I must admit, we did make a couple of changes from the Coventry game in midweek. We did bring in a couple of more battlers in midfield, but
okay.
Graham Shinney in particular, Christian Bielik, who's just coming back from a long-term ACL injury. This is only his 2nd or 3rd appearance in 12 months, and it looked like he'd not missed a beat.
Which number was he?
Number 5.
Yeah, solid.
Yeah, I mean, he drives Derby forward. In all fairness, we've had him nearly 2 years now, and we've not seen a great deal of him because of the injury. So,
okay.
We know he's a big driving force, and he can play centre off or that defensive role. So we know he's got a tackle in him, and we saw that. And actually, I thought there was a couple of players that Derby, they got stuck in.
They did,
and which is nice to see. Don't get me wrong. There was a couple of unnecessary. Unnecessary fouls and things like that, but I think we almost kind of played Millwall at their own game a little bit.
Out Millwall, I think, and I think it's telling that there wasn't a booking for Millwall. Ben Thompson, our number 8, didn't have a great game today. And he's usually quite hard-working and battling, but yeah. And I actually thought the referee was potentially slightly harsh on Derby, which after the midweek Blackburn game was an interesting contrast.
I thought it. Yeah, I must admit, I don't think I can argue from in terms of Derby getting yellow cards or anything like that. I don't think I can complain. I think they were challengers deserved of that. I think, in all fairness, we made a couple of changes in that central midfield role because we were kind of towing the line a little bit. There'd been one or 2 late ones, and I think the ref had a word, and Rooney did the right thing by bringing him off, because I do think with the heat of what that game was, and as I say, it was very full-blooded. I think is one of the best ways of describing it. We could have seen a red card from a Derby perspective. So glad he made the changes when he did, and it also shored it up and seen off the Millwall threat for the last 10 minutes.
Just a quick one. Obviously, there were fans back at the Den today. 2,000 of them were selected from our season ticket holders. Did you feel that that's unfair? Because my understanding at the moment is that Derby would not have allowed fans into their ground because they're in Tier 3. So from a Derby fan's perspective, was there a bit of actually, we're going down to the Den and, notoriously I think the crowd is like the 13th man down there. Or 12th even, if I could count. Did you harbour any of those feelings going in today?
Do you know what? To be honest with you, the first time I was listening to a podcast earlier on this morning from a Derby County perspective, and it was the first time I've really heard it mentioned, and it did get me thinking a little bit. I mean, in certain scenarios, it could be deemed an unfair advantage, but I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, for me personally, being able to hear that crowd, even though it wasn't for a Derby persuasion, it's just great to hear that. It's great to see that fans are back. For good and bad. The Millwall crowd,
yeah, indeed,
and I thought it added to the game. I thought it added to the atmosphere. I'm sure, obviously, it would have been much better if it was 15,000 rather than just 2,000 like normal, but. I mean, it's in terms of taking it away from Derby Millwall just for a second, it's a step forward in terms of getting fans back to grounds. However they can do it, however they work it, I mean, I'm itching at the bit to get back because it's been a big miss out of my life for the last 9 months.
Oh, yeah.
And, I know for a fact that I'm with probably 500,000 other football fans who have got season tickets up and down the country at whatever level would agree with the exact same thing. So any little positive that we can get to get fans back at the minute would be great because, football without fans on the TV, no crowds, no atmosphere is completely different. So anything that they can do in terms of that, then I'm thumbs up for it. I'm behind that 100%.
Well, look, it's been fantastic having you on. Thank you for doing review from the opposition. Thank you for your predictions. Good luck with the rest of the season. We might talk again when we come up to Pride Park.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason.